So you want to build a fish room. Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it, right? How many tanks are you going to have? What's your filtration going to be like? Are you going to have concrete floors, rubber floors, lighting, heating? What type of fish are you going to keep? Where are you going to buy your tanks from? How much is it going to cost you? These are all questions that I had when I started to build what is now officially running my fish room. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the fish room. I'm Trent Wel-Don with Wel-Don Tanks. We are talking tips tonight on building a fish room. So I am still in the process of building my fish room. We're not completed yet. And the fun thing about this hobby, especially when you choose to build a fish room, is I don't think you're ever going to truly be done, right? There's always going to be something that's going to keep your attention going, your mind going. What's the next great project? Can I add more tanks? I want this new fish, I want that new fish. So I want to give my 3 tips tonight on I learned from building my fish room. But before we get started on my tips, I brought in 2 professionals to give you their tips on building their fish rooms. So let's check out what they have to say.
I want to start by saying a big thank you to Trent for having me on the channel to share with you a few tips about building a fish room. I'm actually going through it right now. I've done it before, and I'm in the process right now, just like Trent is. My name is Ryan. I also go by the Lucky Schmuck on my YouTube channel, Wild Fish Tank. I have experience building a fish room 2 years ago, and I want to share with you, I'm going to give you my 3 top tips on what I learned from that. My first tip is going to be plan ahead and try to have an idea of what the goal of the fish room is. Now, it doesn't matter if you're going to have a fish room of 5 tanks, 10 tanks, or 100 tanks. In my opinion, what your goal is going to dictate how you want that set up and what size tanks you have, in addition to what type of fish. You may want to keep a certain type of fish. You can keep them all in a community in a 125-gallon tank. If your goal is to just have an enjoyable fish room with big portrait-style tanks, that's perfect. If you want to breed, that might not be the best setup. If your goal is to breed, you're going to need multiple tanks for certain species. You're going to want systems and processes, and you may not be worried about putting too much into the comfort level of your fish room. It may look more like a laboratory. That's not to say you can't have the best of both worlds. Now, when I think of a pure scientific laboratory fish room, the first one that jumps to mind is Dean's Fish Room. It's a tight-knit space. It's clean. You can tell it's business. There's process, and he's breeding fish, and he's very successful. First fish room that comes to mind when I think of just a gallery, so to speak, would be Joey, the King of DIY. Actually, haven't checked out his channel or watched him in a bit, but as far as I know, he doesn't do much breeding. It's more of just kind of like a chill spot to hang out in and show off his fish and enjoy them. But that's not to say you can't kind of blend both. And an example of that, in my opinion, would be something like Primetime Aquatics. Awesome, cool fish room. Never been in it myself, but it seems like a cool place to hang out. And if I'm correct, he breeds a good amount of fish and is actually, pretty functional too. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that my first rack system was actually kind of set up like a portrait King of DIY style, although it was a lot more ghetto than that, and it was more based off of Aquarium Co-Op's cinder block and 2x4s. But at the end of the day, I came to realize that that was great for viewing the fish, but in terms of breeding and the more tank space I needed, I wanted to rearrange that, which is why I did that recently. Also, I noticed that since the amount of fish that I'm breeding, I need some smaller fish in different stages of tanks for grow outs. If you want some tanks just to enjoy your fish, you may have one uniform size. Whereas if you're trying to grow fish out and breed them, you're probably gonna want some smaller tanks like these 10s and maybe some 20-gallon longs, 40s, 50s, but different sizes for potentially different stages of fish. My second tip is to set yourself up with processes. Now, I'll get to why I don't think it's a good idea to automate everything in a minute, but I think it is a good idea to automate a lot and use central systems for a lot. Now, I don't necessarily mean a central system of water that recirculates, because that can run into some problems, but I mean automated systems like an automatic water change, or at least some type of semi-automatic water change, a central air system to run your tanks, centrally taking care of the temperature, meaning controlling the room as opposed to each individual tank. And that comes to tank placement also. We talk about a fish room, but some people may have tanks across their house in a fish house. Right now I have 2 tanks in my house, and these 2 tanks are kind of outliers. Right now, as my fish room grows, I'm trying to shrink anything that's outside of my central processes. if I have a fish or a tank or something that needs special care, I'm trying to limit that. As you get more and more tanks and more fish, your responsibility to them definitely increases. And in order to make it easier and doable, you need to automate certain things. One thing I don't automate is feeding. And not that I'm against automating of feeding. I think it definitely has its time and its place. My opinion is if I automate everything, and that feeding would kind of be the last brick for me in order to automate almost everything, now I'm not spending as much time putting my eyes on these fish. And it's important that even if you have 50, 100 tanks, that you're getting some eye time on those fish on a regular basis, if not daily, more than weekly, because you want to be sure to catch something if something happens. And for me, not having automating feedings forces me to actually go to each individual tank and feed it and take a look at those fish and enjoy them while I'm there too. The third tip I want to share with you, and it's one that's helped me a lot. I definitely would not be here today, and it's something that you continuously do, and that's learn from others. I'm not ashamed to admit that I definitely drew a lot from Corey at Aquarium Co-Op when I first started, and I watched tons and tons of videos in terms of automated water change systems. I looked at Michael's Fish Room and the Fish Nerd. I mean, I copied off of everybody. I looked at everyone's freaking notebook and took their notes. But that's what you do. I mean, they put the video out there for that reason, right? And luckily, we live in a time now where people are willing to share and give that information out there. And we have more and more people building fish rooms and trying out new things. Not saying that you shouldn't try out new things. However, if you get stuck or you're looking for something, always, in my opinion, start with the tried and true. And the great news is everyone's situation is so unique. I have yet to see a fish room system that can be identically translated to someone else. You know, we're dealing with different climates, we're dealing with different fish. So it's awesome to see people pull from people, and at the end of the day, my fish room is never going to be exactly the same as someone else's fish room, even if I try to copy it exactly. So don't be afraid to research and copy off of others. Thanks again, Trent, for having me on. Best of luck to you as you get started on your fish room, whether it's your first or your third or your 10th.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Guppy Garage. So Trent asked me to make a quick video kind of explaining a couple of the things that I have really enjoyed in my fish room as far as like building a current fish room and what I think is very important for the fish room. First of which being plugs. So plugs are one of the biggest things that we need. We need lots of plugs for heaters and air pumps and lights and all that kind of, you know, stuff we need for our fish tanks. And I really liked these plugs. So this is the 360 electrical power curve. So the nice part about these power plugs is that they actually can rotate. So you can rotate them. Let me see if I can show you guys. So you can rotate. As you can see back here, we've got these plugs, but they actually will rotate. So kind of the unfortunate part about most of the lights and the plugs that come with a lot of the aquarium stuff is that they are different connectors. So all of the connectors are either fat or thin, and then you need more space or you need them to be turned, and then you end up having one plug that's not used. And the really nice part about this particular plug is that you can rotate these and you can use them in whatever direction is needed. So I've got these for the lights. I've got two of them, one for each rack. But then I also have, sorry about the mess in the garage here. I also have these really long cables. I've got two of those behind the racks, and those run just across the whole back of the rack, and that connects everything together. And then I've got timers as well. And I just use let me see if I can pull one out of here. I just use the Miros or whatever smart plug you can find. They're really, you know, a great option for a fish room. It's really nice when you can just go, hey Alexa, turn off the Guppy Garage. And you can just do that. That is an incredible thing. But definitely get the Electricity 360. There's a lot of different brands, but I really like this one in particular. Okay, so another thing that we need to think about is the floor. So right now I'm currently sitting on the floor, but on my floor I have these rubber mats. So there's lots of different styles of rubber mat. There's the ones that you can get for a gym. There's the one you can get for a garage. I really like this particular rubber. It is actually, I believe, designed for like floor mats and that kind of stuff in vehicles. I had a huge roll of it, so I put it all across the floor here, and if I didn't have this, I would have a crazy mold problem in here, just from spilling water and throwing plants on the ground and all the stuff that comes with a fish room. So definitely get yourself something that is a rubber material for the floor, because it'll save you a lot of hassle. You can easily mop it up, you can easily vacuum it. Definitely just the way to go if you are looking to build a fish room. So another thing when having a fish room with a lot of water and a lot of sometimes standing water, when you have buckets and stuff that you forget about, is mosquitoes. So mosquitoes and bugs are going to be an issue in any fish room, just because of the fact that they are going to end up getting in here. They're going to end up laying their eggs and having their more and more babies in these fish tanks and the buckets and all that stuff that we have. If you don't have fish in those tanks, more than likely you're going to get a huge bloom of mosquitoes. I have a lot of mosquitoes in the fish room right now. I'm trying to get rid of them, and the way that has worked best for me is actually just to get a outdoor mosquito catcher or electricity machine. I don't know what their terms are, but it just attracts them. They go up, they get zapped, and then they fall in, and that is a great way to catch mosquitoes. Another great way to catch mosquitoes is, of course, to have fish in your tanks. I mean, that is definitely the easiest route, but if you don't and you have buckets, so like currently I actually have this bucket right here. So this bucket is just full of salt water to make sure that my nets don't spread disease. And as you can see, we've got a few mosquitoes in there. So there's just a few mosquitoes flying around, but that is salt water, so they will live in practically anything. So having something, having something like that in order to catch or kill the mosquitoes in your fish room is definitely going to be a huge help in building a room. So keep in mind that you may need a plug that stays on 24/7 so that you can make sure that that stays on all the time. So hopefully these tips helped you. Thank you, Trent, for asking me to make some videos explaining some of the tips that I like for my fish room, and hopefully they help you as well. And be sure to spread that guppy love.
So let me give you my 3 tips now on what I learned in building my fish room. So tip number 1, figure out what you're gonna do. What do I mean? Figure out, are you gonna be a display tank? Are you gonna be a breeding operation? Are you gonna be something kind of in the middle? You need to decide what you're going to do with your fish room before you actually do it. I had a very difficult time with that. I went from, I want display tanks and breeding tanks, right? The first initial, we're gonna have the 220 gallon on one wall. Then we're gonna have one rack of breeding tanks with the cube tank behind me. Now I'm to the point of, I have rack. I'm debating on setting up more tanks where I live stream. I have I will technically 2 display tanks in here. So I got things always working, and I wasted a lot of money, unfortunately, but I also wasted a lot of time in the fact that I kept changing what I wanted to do until I finally landed on this is what I knew I wanted to do. So my recommendation, my first tip is really give it some thought. Do you want to be breeding fish in your room, or do you want more of a display tank, more of a gallery setup? So my second tip for building a fish room is gonna be filtration. I'm very fortunate that I had Aquarium Co-Op sponsor me with that linear air piston pump, and I choose to run sponge filters in all of my tanks. I literally think it is the best way to filter a fish room, because I am using the coarse sponge filters from Aquarium Co-Op, and they're cheap, they're very effective, they're easy to clean, and it's way more energy efficient than running hang in the back filters on everything, or running internal filters on everything, running sumps on everything. But that's something you're going to need to decide. That kind of goes hand in hand with, are you going to be breeding, or are you going to be doing display tanks? If you're doing display tanks, you may want to invest in something like a canister filter or a small hang in the back filter to better meet your needs and requirements. And some sponge filters can honestly be kind of unsightly in a fish tank, but I personally love the benefits that sponge filters bring to my aquariums and how simple it is to filter so many tanks with one air pump. And that's because the way that that air pump is rated and it's sized and built, it allows me to run a central air system, so I can run 30 sponge filters in 30 tanks and have plenty of filtration for everything. My third and final tip for building a fish room is going to be humidity control. It's a lot of water in a small area that I have right now. My fish room really is only about 8 feet by 7 feet. Small room. And I've packed a lot of tanks in here. So I kind of have just enough room to kind of shimmy around and do everything. And with that, I'm close to 30 tanks in here. I will be when all this is done. That's a lot of water in one room. Now when I painted this fish room, I did use a primer that will help, you know, reduce that moisture going into the walls, but you still got to be cautious of that. So I use lids on all my aquariums, and then I was very fortunate in, as I was building this fish room, because it was an unfinished basement, I was able to install a ceiling fan that I can control on a switch. I have a temperature and humidity gauge in my fish room, so I constantly monitor my humidity, you know, and run that ceiling fan when I need to. But then you may need to invest into a dehumidifier. Now with that dehumidifier, you're going to generate heat. So it can be a good thing to help heat your fish room, or it may be a detrimental thing because it may make your fish room too hot. So something you're gonna need to factor in when building your fish room is a definite way to control the humidity in your fish room. So I can't thank Peter with Guppy Guru and Ryan with Wild Fish Tanks enough for, you know, supporting me, collaborating with me, being willing to give up their time to film a video and share their tips that they had on building their fish rooms. I've personally been in Peter's his fish room, or his Guppy Garage. Awesome place. It really is just like a zen place, super cool place. And he's done a really good job in making it a very feng shui functional area. And then we get with Wild Fish Tanks, who I one day would love to be able to go visit his fish cave, right, and everything he's got going on there. But talk about a dude that had the passion and went with it. If you followed his channel and his progression of building his fish room, he went from something incredible to something incredible. So I can't thank Ryan enough. And if you make sure to check out both of their channels. If you want to support Guppy Guru, check out Salt City Aquatics. You can purchase his guppies through there. If you want to support Ryan from Wild Fish Tanks, check out wildfishtanks.com. I personally have fish from both parties, and I love the results I've gotten from them. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you guys on the next one.